There's a specific experience that almost no one in the AI conversation has named. It's not the fear of being replaced. You've heard that framing 100 times. It's something quieter and more personal. It's the sense that the decade you spent getting really good at your work, the cases, the failures, the judgment you built through repetition, somehow doesn't count the way it used to. That the craft you earn slowly is now worth less than output generated in 45 seconds. That feeling has a name, and once it's named, something shifts. What you're going to understand by the end of this video isn't a reassurance, it's a mechanism. The specific reason why professional experience doesn't compete with AI fluency. It amplifies it, not as a philosophical claim, as the way the technology actually functions. First, what the evidence actually shows about experience and AI output quality. Then, the mechanism underneath that evidence, why it works this way. Then, what this means for how you use AI differently than someone with 2 years of experience. There's a study that doesn't get nearly enough attention in the AI content space. Researchers at Harvard and Boston Consulting Group tested 758 consultants, about 7% of BCG's total consulting workforce, on realistic professional tasks using GPT-4. They gave everyone the same tools, same access, same prompts, same AI. Here's what they found. Professionals with deeper domain expertise completed more tasks, finished faster, and produced results that scored measurably higher in quality than those with shallower domain knowledge, even though they were all using identical tools. The gap wasn't in the technology, it was in the judgment applied to the output. And the researchers noted something else, something that lands differently the more professional experience you have. Professionals who had weaker domain knowledge tended to accept AI output at face value. They couldn't tell when it was wrong. The experienced professionals could. There's a separate piece of research from a Harvard Business School follow-up that tested professionals with different distances from the subject matter. Web analysts, marketing specialists, and technology specialists, all using identical AI tools on identical tasks. Everyone got faster, that part was equal, but the professionals furthest from the domain scored 13% lower on quality despite having the exact same AI access. The researchers gave this a name: knowledge distance. The farther you are from the domain, the less AI can compensate. Domain expertise transfers directly into output quality in ways that proximity to the tool simply does not. That's not a secondary finding. That's the central one. And it's the one almost no AI content creator is talking about, because it doesn't fit the narrative that experience is a liability in a world that moves this fast. The narrative is wrong. Here's why. AI produces at the level of the instructions it receives. That sentence sounds simple, but follow it to its conclusion and everything changes. The quality of the instructions you give an AI tool is a direct function of your domain expertise, not your familiarity with the interface, not how many hours you've spent prompting, your expertise in the subject matter itself. Here's what that looks like in practice. A marketing coordinator with 10 years of experience sits down with an AI writing tool. She doesn't just ask for a campaign brief. She knows which client sensitivities will make a draft unusable. She knows which framing will get killed in the first review. She knows what the brand has tried before and why it failed. She prompts with all of that context, explicitly or implicitly, and the output that comes back is shaped by 10 years of judgment that the tool itself doesn't possess. An HR professional with 12 years of experience reviewing an AI-drafted performance framework doesn't read it like a document. She reads it like someone who has watched 3 of those frameworks create exactly the wrong incentives inside actual teams. She knows which language signals legal exposure before it surfaces. She knows which structure will get ignored by managers versus the one that actually changes behavior. The AI produced a starting point. Her expertise turned it into something that works. A financial analyst with 8 years of sector experience looks at an AI-generated summary of a company's position and knows, not because a system flagged it, but because he's seen this pattern before, that the revenue number is technically accurate and functionally misleading. The AI gave him the information, his experience gave him the judgment to know what the information meant. Here's the thing, nobody says out loud about this. A junior colleague who is very good at prompting and a senior professional who adds domain judgment to that prompting are not in the same position. They have access to the same tools. They do not have access to the same inputs. The tool is identical. The knowledge that shapes what goes in and evaluates what comes out is not interchangeable. That's not a consolation for experienced professionals. That's the structural reality of how these systems function. Your expertise is not competing with the tool. Your expertise is what makes the tool produce anything worth keeping. Let's name what's actually been happening. For the past 2 to 3 years, the dominant message in every AI article, every LinkedIn post, every conference keynote has been a version of the same thing. Adapt fast or fall behind. And underneath that message, not always spoken, but always implied, was the assumption that the people who would fall behind were the ones with the most invested in the old way of working, the most experienced, the ones with the deepest craft. That assumption felt true because of what was visible. Younger colleagues demoing tools confidently, faster outputs appearing to replace slower ones, the product of years looking, on the surface, like it could be replicated in minutes. So the feeling that landed quietly, persistently was, what I built might be more liability than asset. Here's the honest reframe, not the reassuring one, the accurate one. What AI can replicate is the output that looks like your work. What it cannot replicate is the judgment that knows when that output is right. It cannot replicate the professional instinct that catches the thing that looks correct but isn't. It cannot replicate the pattern recognition that only comes from having seen this problem in this industry with these stakeholders fail in this specific way before. It cannot replicate the calibration that separates the version that technically works from the version that actually lands. Those things, the things that took a decade to develop, are not competing with AI. They are precisely what makes AI usable at a professional level. Research on this puts it clearly. A combined 64% of professionals surveyed believe I will increase the value of deep expertise, not reduce it. Because as AI handles more of the production layer, human expertise moves up the stack. The stack doesn't get smaller. The layer where experience matters gets closer to the surface of every output. That's what your expertise is the foundation, not the problem actually means. Not a slogan, a mechanism. If this reframe landed, if something shifted in how you're reading your own experience, the next step is building the professional identity that follows from it. There's a resource in the description designed exactly for that. A structured path for turning the combination of your existing expertise and AI fluency into a positioning that is genuinely difficult to replace. Not a course about tools, a strategy for what you become. Link in the description and in the pinned comment. Here's the internal objection worth naming before it goes unnamed. I've heard experience is valuable before. It's what people say to make you feel better while the junior colleague who's comfortable with the tools actually moves faster. That objection is real. And the answer to it isn't reassurance, it's precision. The junior colleague who is comfortable with tools and the senior professional who adds domain judgment are faster at different things. The junior colleague is faster at generating a first draft. The senior professional is faster at knowing which draft is worth developing and why the other three aren't. In a world where first drafts are cheap, the ability to evaluate them correctly is what determines whether the output is worth anything. That's not a soft skill, that's the bottleneck. Here's what that looks like. In the 3 places it shows up most. First, in the quality of what you put in. When you prompt an AI tool with 10 years of professional context, the real constraints, the stakeholder dynamics, the failure modes, the output is shaped by that context in ways that someone without it simply cannot replicate. The prompt is the same, the knowledge behind the prompt is not. Second, in how you evaluate what comes out. The question isn't whether the output is correct in isolation. It's whether it's correct for this situation, this audience, these constraints. That judgment, the difference between technically accurate and actually right, is domain knowledge. It doesn't come with the interface. Third, in how you explain the difference. The experienced professional who can look at 2 AI outputs, identify which one works and why, and explain that reasoning to a client, a manager, or a team, that professional is demonstrating something the tool cannot demonstrate for itself. That's not just useful. That is increasingly the specific capability organizations cannot generate internally. This is what integration looks like. Not adoption, not learning to use a tool, becoming the professional who understands what the tool needs from you and has spent 10 years acquiring exactly that. If the specific next step is building the career strategy that follows from this reframe, the resource in the description takes it from insight to positioning, what this means for how you present, what you build, and what you become. Link is in the description and in the pinned comment. What's the moment you realized your experience was doing something in your AI work that you couldn't have done 2 years into your career? There's a version of the last 3 years that happened to a lot of experienced professionals. They watched the announcements. They consumed the content. They felt the ground move under work they'd spent a decade building. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, they absorbed a story they were never explicitly told but couldn't stop hearing. The people who built something slowly are the ones in trouble. That story was not accurate. It was visible. The demonstration was loud. The mechanism was quiet. And the mechanism, the actual way these systems function, has always rewarded the professional who knows what good looks like in the domain they've spent years inside. The people in your field who will look back on this period as the moment they built something rather than the moment something was done to them are not people with more technical background. They're not people with more appetite for disruption. They're not the ones who started younger. They are the professionals who understood that the decade behind them was not a liability to overcome, but the primary input the technology requires to produce anything worth keeping. You now have that understanding, not as encouragement, as the mechanism. A year from now, there will be professionals in your field who combined what they already knew with what they're adding now, and came out holding something neither the tool nor a less experienced user could have produced. Those aren't exceptional people. They're people who stopped treating their expertise as the problem and started treating it as the foundation. You now know what that path looks like. What you do with it is yours.